Good news, everyone! The PlayStation 5 is less than a year away, and we already have tons of information regarding the console, from the official name to the capabilities of individual hardware components. The bad news is that we don't know what it looks like or how much it'll cost yet, but new console launches are always an exciting time. The conversations, speculations, the countdowns. Well, today, I'm jumping into the conversation and want to take a look at some of the things we do know about the next generation PlayStation machine. With all the information that's already available, we can start to paint a picture of what the experience will look like when you sit down and earn your first trophy on the PS5. It is worth noting that a recent leak suggested the PS5 will launch on November 20th of next year at $499. Now, I want to stay away from rumors, but having said that, I actually hope that's pretty accurate. So let's take a closer look. The good news is that the images circulating around are of the dev kit. This is not what the final design will look like, although some people actually like the design because of the extreme measures that went with the ventilation. The bad news is that the PS5 doesn't have proper ventilation and is as noisy as our current systems. There will be a lot of angry people. It needs to run quieter, that's for certain. There are rumors that this actually could be the final design, but I'm not so sure. Now, one of the most interesting things about the PS5 is the switch to SSD, but not just any SSD, one that promises virtually no loading times. High-end gaming PCs have considerably less loading times than we get on the PS4, but Sony appears to suggest that it'll be aiming for much better results. PlayStation 4 and PS5 architect Mark Cerny showed a demo of this tech where he fast-traveled in less than 1 second. While that's great news, I'm holding off until I can see a demo on a next-gen game where it'll need to transfer a whole lot more data due to the, well, I would assume, far increased file sizes. The bad news is that it raises a bunch of questions. For example, what will the capacity be? Anyone who's shopped for an SSD knows that on average the costs double when going from 500 gig to 1 terabit and then can double again to reach 2 terabit. The cost to Sony, of course, will be far less than us average consumers since they're going to be buying these at tens of millions at a time. Now, the other concern I have is what about replacing the drive for a higher capacity as we've been accustomed to with the PS3 and the PS4? What will this mean for those individuals who use external drives to expand our storage? Sony uses the word custom SSD. If that means proprietary, then we may be forced to use PlayStation branded drives for storage, not unlike Vita and the memory cards, and let's be honest, I'm not sure I can trust Sony with pricing them competitively. What I kind of hope for is just a simple 500 gig machine, which I know is a very low capacity, but it will keep the price down, which will be important for them to dominate next generation. I also would like them to have 1 or 2 empty bays inside the PS5 that we can slide additional SSDs into, much like most desktop PCs allow you to do. I really don't see how external drives could give us the fast data transfer speeds that they're promising. Now, I don't like the idea of proprietary drives, but if that's the route they go, I hope that Sony allows third-party vendors to manufacture and sell their own. Now, if you'd allow me to get slightly technical for a moment, the PS5 will have an AMD CPU and GPU, which is coming at a great time as AMD has become a much bigger player in the PC space after a stretch of dominance from Intel. The CPU is based on the Ryzen line and the GPU is part of the Navi family, which of course supports ray tracing. Ray tracing is the generation-defining technology moving forward. I have watched dozens of videos about the technology, and I'm very excited it's coming. But with the excitement of some truly spectacular visuals comes some concerns. For the simplest explanation of what ray tracing is, think back to animated movies in the early 90s, and then Toy Story came out, and you can really see the early visions of ray tracing. And those movies have gotten incredibly more beautiful in the years since. It took 25 years before real-time ray tracing came to video games because movies, it would take them hours and hours just to render one single frame of video in the early days. Simply stated, ray tracing improves the visual image by using any light source and have that light move and bounce off other objects as they do in the real world while casting accurate shadows. This is particularly noticeable with reflections from mirrors or water. The rays will bounce off of objects and factor in what type of material that surface is. This same technology also works with audio in the same way, which will allow for the 3D audio Sony has been touting for the PS5. Ray tracing is going to make games look much better, but this isn't all great news. Unfortunately, we are in the early days of ray tracing, so the bad news is that ray tracing is a massive performance hit on the graphics card. Even with high-end gaming PCs, having ray tracing turned on reduces your frame rate by 30%, give or take. Now this is going to have a major impact on our frames per second. While I believe all games will probably run at 60 frames per second, I'm hoping there's an option to disable ray tracing to increase frame rates to maybe 120. We see many new games today with the option to select between visual or performance modes, and I suspect we'll see a lot more of that next year, and because let's be honest, people play on PC for the higher frame rates. Let's also not forget that graphic cards that perform ray tracing quite well cost more than the rumored PS5 cost of $499. The good news is that Sony is working closely with AMD and designing a custom configuration to get the best performance for the lowest price. It's also good news that the PS5 will support 8K. 8K, really? Well, the bad news is that we won't be playing native 8K games. In fact, I'll just go on thinking it's clever marketing until they prove otherwise. It might just be the same checkerboarding effect that they use on the PS4 Pro's 4K graphics. Either way, don't let this spec influence your purchase decision. When they do the official unveiling, I just want everyone to roll their eyes every time they mention 8K. Next up, and for me, this is actually great news, the PS5 controller, for which I will presume will be just called the DualShock 5, looks like it'll remain a similar shape and design to the DualShock 4. Of course, Sony hasn't officially revealed it, but all the signs are pointing to this being the actual controller. There is a possibility that it will change and this new design is a temporary controller for the dev kits, but if it's real, the touchpad remains and the light bar is gone. We do know the controller will replace the rumble technology with haptic feedback for better rumble immersion, and it will have adaptive triggers which will change the amount of force needed to pull the trigger based on environmental impacts in the game. For example, drawing a bow versus pulling a trigger on a gun. Bad news is that they haven't spoken about what the battery life is. It needs to be double what the current DualShock 4 was. No exceptions. And what about the light bar that I hated so much and most people hated? While it angered most people that it couldn't be turned off, you still needed it for VR. I can only speculate maybe there will be an attachment that can be plugged into the controller and clip it on or something. Either way, I know I'm a freak, but I'm glad the touchpad remains. I'd say that's most of the major bullet points for the PS5. There are smaller tidbits out there like the ability to download only certain parts of a game, for example just the single player campaign or the online multiplayer. I can only take that to mean that game sizes are about to get really, really big. Now the one thing I need to know is if download speeds are going to be dramatically improved. I need a show of hands of people with high-speed internet who has downloaded something that took over 12 hours. Let me know in the comments what your longest download time was. I think I'm at 24 hours. I think on Death Stranding. Sony has also confirmed that PS5 streaming will be a focus, but we'll have to wait and see on that, how it comes out. The PS5 will be backwards compatible with PS4, but I highly doubt I could just unplug my external drive from my PS4 and then plug it right into the PS5, although it'll be a big win if that is the case. So in conclusion, I'm extremely excited to see what the PS5 will bring us. The next generation of gaming is coming, and it'll be hard not to see PlayStation come out on top once again. And we haven't even talked about the games yet. The good news is that Sony knows that the games are the key to success, and I really believe that they're giving the developers all the tools they need to dominate next gen. Bad news, I haven't figured out what I'm going to do with my channel name. Thanks for watching, I'll see you soon.